This program is sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello, Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, and tonight is January 9th, 2021, and the Capricorn Planet Buzz panel will join me later. We're going to focus on the first of three squares that really are dynamic energies for this entire year, and that's between Saturn and Uranus, and that will be on the first one on January 17th. And this transit aspect includes the planets of the recent great conjunction, also known as the great mutation, grand mutation. And it's between Jupiter and Saturn. Every 20 years, it resets our social dynamics. It's a break and expansion energy. And as they transit Aquarius, and they're still in a close conjunction because, it'll be all until April. So we're working through a long, energetic time and by a square, we're reflecting on 90 degrees. You know, a circle has 360 and 90 has an angle. And those energies, just imagine if it was water, air, or anything, they're going something has to happen, and it is a resolving energy. Maybe not always the way we anticipate, and that's the dynamics we're talking about. How can we best function or work with this? And particularly because it's also in square to Taurus, which is Earth sign. They're fixed. We'll talk about more of this later. But the primary factor about this intriguing dynamic, and that's one way to present this on an objective form, is that they are both co-rulers of Aquarius. Aquarius traditionally has Saturn, and the modern ruler is Uranus. So perhaps that's really spells it out more than anything, is the old and the new and in between, because there's gaps there, right? Okay, and I will say now it's time for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on planetary ecliptic orbital cycles and planetary pairs called synodic cycles connecting the planets at the same degree that begin our relationship, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Leslie Francis, author of the 2019 and 2020 Llewellyn Sun Sign books, a practicing professional astrologer intuitive, a lecturer, and host of my own podcast, Coloring Outside the Box. My lifelong search to understand what it is to be human led me to develop my own approach to astrology called purpose-centered astrology. I passionately seek to support people in their greatest act of creativity, living life, through consultations and webinars. Creator of star cards, I love talking and making people laugh.
I'm Tara All, an astrologer, writer, and artist who loves spirituality and metaphysics. I practice and teach evolutionary astrology, and I work with the tarot, crystals, hermeticism, and animal medicine. My approach is creative and experiential, and I created a YouTube video series called We Are the Planets through EA Zoom meetings. I also speak at conferences. Currently, I'm the resident astrologer and lead writer for Sage Goddess, and I serve on the ESAR board as marketing director.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I have a PhD in human science and work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with people around the world. I teach and lecture on astrology both in person and remotely, I have a blog. I have written for the Mountain Astrologer, Celestial Vibes, and Tarot.com. Additionally, I am the educational coordinator for Live Life Resources, an educational nonprofit specializing in resiliency training, education, and research.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
As below, so above. As above, so below.
Oh, it looks like we lost Sue. Well, I'm going to just jump in before she gets going because I'm going to be our little fact corrector. The Saturn Uranus square is actually going to be, the first one is February 17th, not January 17th. But what is happening on January 17th is Jupiter is going to square Uranus. And as soon as we get Sue back on here, I think we're going to talk about how that leads into it. But just didn't want to cause any confusion, right? The big thing that everyone's talking about, the Saturn square Uranus, happens 3 times, February 17th, June 14th, and then the final one is December 23rd.
Well, and what's interesting, one of the things I had discovered as I was doing some research is that, so these, particularly the Saturn-Uranus square, stays in the same mode for an extended period of time. So even though they're square roughly every 20 years, they've been in a fixed sign every square since 75.
Oh.
And then prior to that, so all the squares were in cardinal signs from, so they'll be, and they are in fixed signs until 2043. So
And
it's this huge.
Yeah. But what does that mean, fixed, right? Because fixed to me is like stuff crystallized, stuck. So, I mean, there's going to take extra movement, right, to shake that stuff up.
Or
it's the most
solid and persevering.
Yeah, well, I think there's it's all of the fixed signs. So Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, they're the most intense in a lot of ways. If you think about the signs in terms of seasonal, those are the signs that are in the middle of seasons. And so there's the most heightened part of the element are the fixed signs. And so, for over 40 years, this shift, this interaction, this square has been in some ways more intense than it had been previously, or than it will be after 2043, which, I don't know how many of us will still be around then, but
I'm planning on it.
Well, it really indicates that, for the last essentially 45 years, almost 50, we've been dealing with intense clashes between the fixed signs and people getting really entrenched in thoughts and ideas, whether it was an error or not, staking your claim on something and not realizing that, if there's one thing that's inevitable, it's change.
Yeah. And we were in our pre-meeting, when we were getting ready for this, we were talking about how that Saturn in Aquarius energy, what is the challenge between that and Uranus and Taurus? And part of that we talked about being like the interest of self, or what keeps me safe and keeps me secure as an individual versus my actual contribution to community. And right now, man, we can just see that publicly, how that's clashing together.
Can you see me?
You're here.
Yeah. Oh,
welcome back.
You're back. And my chart, I don't know if other people are like this, but I think between last week and this week, it must be Aquarius. Something is like, anyway, I'm glad to be back. So, and it was very dynamic, what I was hearing. Can you kind of fill me in a little bit, like what you were saying? Like,
we're just jumping into the Saturn Uranus square. We were just starting to talk about, Laura was talking about how there's been 75 years of that happening in fixed signs. And so we were kind of talking about how that fixed energy, how that Aquarius and Taurus, how they are trying to basically corner off and integrate and come together. And we just mentioned how part of that is between the interests of the individual, like what I need, what's mine, what keeps me safe, what keeps me secure versus what we need as a collective. And right now that's really up for negotiation, clearly. So.
Beautiful. And I want to thank each one of you stellar people. I am so thrilled because that, I'll just lead in with one sentence that I was going to introduce, but now it's past that. But I was thinking too, that the dynamic planetary archetypal energies, with, as we're discussing, between Saturn and Uranus, is it exactly that. It presents new accountability for social changes rooted through conflicting survival concerns. So I think exactly what you were so well synthesizing is the name of the game. Yes.
And then what side you're on. I mean, all of us have more of an affinity towards, one side of energy versus the other. So, there's that too. And this isn't not just externally, it's internally. We're all having this negotiation. Well, even with ourselves, like imagine yourself as one being having a bunch of needs collectively versus the individual parts of you. Those are at odds too. So, our opening is as above, so below, and it's also as within, so without. And I feel like that's really being electrified right now. Yeah, huge.
It is. And I'm thinking too, we have such different reactions. Just looking at the fight, flight, and then because did anybody bring up the fact that there's this Jupiter conjuncting still with, you did bring that up, the energy between Saturn and Jupiter with Mars. Because in this particular chart, maybe I can pull it up so that people can see it. I will try to do that. But Mars and Uranus, they're all in orb. But I think we agreed that that's really...
but we didn't tell everybody this yet, so we should tell them.
Okay, yes, indeed. Well, as I pull it up, feel free, yes.
Well, so part of this square that we're talking about, before the Saturn squares Uranus exactly in a little over a month, Jupiter will hit it exactly. And so because they were just in this grand conjunction, they're still pretty close to each other, but Jupiter moves at about a little more than twice the speed of Saturn around the zodiac. So it's moving much more quickly than Saturn. So it's ahead, even though they were just recently at the same degree. So Jupiter will square first, and it's actually exactly a month apart. All right, we get Jupiter square Uranus on the 17th of January, and then Saturn square Uranus on the 17th of February. And adding to that, because they're still so close, we really can't look at them too much in isolation. Yeah. Right. That there's this merging of energy when things are conjunct. And when it's in your personal chart, it's sometimes hard to even feel those archetypes as separate entities because they're so intertwined. So this particular square is really unique in that Jupiter is so close. It turns out that the last square Jupiter was really close as well, but I didn't see that in the other ones when I was looking at it historically. But then adding to that, we get this Mars that just Wednesday ingressed into Taurus. And so that's part of this Uranian piece too, that's adding some intensity and drive, because Mars is where we get our drive natally in a chart. So adding this urgency to this shift that the square is calling in.
Laura, as I'm talking, can you all say, is it large though? It's small, isn't it?
It's small.
Oh, right.
So I want to say that I think that with the Jupiter and the Mars sort of engaging Uranus ahead of Saturn, it's kind of like the energy could be like kicking down the door to make way for practical change, for solutions that will actually work going forward. And of course, we're all going to be experiencing that also, as Tara was saying, on an internal level. Yeah. How does that going to work in my life?
Well, yeah, and so this because part of this is a negotiation or renegotiation between structure and freedom, right? And that's on all levels. It's interesting that even with COVID, like I can speak for myself, so I've now been working remotely for all these months where I didn't before, that's already giving me an opportunity to relook at the idea between freedom and structure. Because all of a sudden I'm not getting in the car and commuting my LA long commute to the office. So we're getting all these different opportunities, I feel like, to relook at how those things work together. But as we all know, squares are never easy. Like, they're never easy. Like, it's tough energy to work with, and it has to get tough enough to make us do something different. So,
it does.
Yeah.
It's like almost like an addiction. If anybody has ever studied or had smoking or whatever it could be, you have to get to rock bottom and to make that change. Can you see this chart?
No.
Okay.
There's nothing on this.
Well, then we won't worry about it and I will say to our audience, we have a new format with the YouTube, and there's just, you know what? It is so much like life right now. We're just dealing on many different terms. And so I won't worry about it. We'll just explain it, because not everybody's looking at YouTube anyway. A lot of people are listening to this. So.
Well, and Uranus is expect the unexpected, so
that's right. Well, it is, and it's a shock value too. And the reason I was bringing that up is because the conversation gave me. Am I echoing again? Gosh darn it! I'm really being confronted with this whole electronic business. For me, is somehow shattering through. I hate to think that I'm that aligned with the astronomy but I am. I have zero. Oh, man. Okay. You guys talk. I only try to talk a little bit because it makes it hard on people.
Well, I think this is a perfect example of what we're dealing with as we try to create new structures. Stuff gets in the way.
Yeah, one thing, do you guys remember when we were talking, because Uranus is going to go direct next Thursday, right? And so that's going to change the game too. And Laura, I think you and you both talked about how the degree it was in previously, I think at the 6 degree mark. Remember, it was back at 6 degrees before, right? I think it was April.
It's in April. Yeah.
And that was April 16th to May 13th.
And that was really right. I mean, like for most of us, when COVID, we were having to that's when we were having to stay home from work, and all those things were changing. It was getting big, and it's 6 degrees again now. And
I will say, Tara, because you're right on, December 21st, it initiated right when we had the Great Conjunction.
Right. Okay. And you guys mentioned, you brought this to my attention. It was great that we get to revisit that degree again. But now we have more information and we maybe have more tools. So, for example, the vaccine is starting to happen now. But we also know, and I can speak from LA, like, it's bad. Like, COVID's worse now than it was then. But so in some ways, it's like we get a redo. You guys had mentioned how that retrograde period, in some ways, it's like a redo. You get a redo, but you've gained some momentum, meaning there's hopefully some new awareness and some new tools. So here we are right now in that moment of new awareness, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Leslie, were you going to say something?
No.
Laura, remember you talked about how part of this is going back to nature, and I love that too, because you were talking about how,
Yeah. Well, I think in part why we're seeing that is Taurus being sort of, in some ways, the earthiest of the earth signs, in the sense that it's the most connected to Mother Earth. Right, as an archetype. And so more and more is coming out in terms of the importance of various nutrients that in protecting ourselves from COVID. And that they're finding that people who have contracted COVID are depleted in melatonin, are depleted in vitamin D, which we get from the sun. So being outside in nature is part of our cure. And interacting with the natural world. And in some ways, this interesting solution where we've all gone inside, we've all become so dependent on technology, and yet part of what we have to turn to heal is going out, being in nature, being outside in a way that's safe. and finding this way to be out in the world in a new way. And I think it's part of why we talked about before that just city after city is having this mass exodus to the country, to the suburbs. People are fleeing to nature. And I think that's part of what we're seeing as well. And it's in some ways part of the solution in this broader way in terms of, you know, the whole global warming has gotten completely sort of sidelined this last year. And part of what people will help people recognize the need to have that be a major part of the incoming administration's platform, which it appears to be, is if you're back in nature after you've been living in Manhattan for 15 years, you suddenly have a much different relationship with the earth, and revolutionizing your relationship with the earth and seeing the urgency, which is what this square brings in, to shift, right? I think of squares, you can get blindsided with squares, right? When I first started studying astrology and I was taught aspects through astrodrama, where you play it out. And it's like, oh, so if I'm Saturn here and Uranus is here, and they don't see each other till they collide. Mm-hmm. And that's this unexpected shift. It's like, oh, no, we have to go a different direction. And
there's so many dynamics. It just comes right thinking about the fact that Saturn is conditioning, and we're deconditioning, reconditioning so many elements of our psyche. And when you say collide, that's what I'm thinking, that is it being authentic to ourselves? Because we were also bringing up the idea that if we're not authentic to ourselves, because we're involving the fixed cross with all the fixed signs, that it can be trauma. And that trauma, it can be a shock and a freezing also. It's hard to synthesize when one's in shock, I think.
Sure. Well, that's what they say, you know, it's fight, flight, or freeze. Right, yes, is what the newest research is.
Absolutely.
Well,
go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well,
please.
I think that the other aspect of the Saturn Uranus square is going to be what, you know, Uranus can be ideals. It can be, let's push as far as we can into the future. And Saturn is going to come along and say, so what is actually doable, what is actually practical? And so I think that, you know, I love that image of a collision, because there's going to be a collision between reality and idealism. And that's always part of the human condition anyways. It's going to be intensified because of the planetary placements. And yet, you know, for me, what I feel, and I have 5 planets in Aquarius, I'm excited. I can't say that I really know what's going to happen. And that's the other aspect of this is, as we can, you know, sort this out and go through it in so many different ways. But the truth is we don't actually know what's going to happen.
And it reminds me of fission or fusion. Help me with the scientific terminology here. But if you take the neutrons, you know, the protons, the atoms, and put it in a machine and it blows it up, or uranium is explosive. It help me here, somebody.
In dividing the atom?
Yeah,
the division of the atom.
Exactly. And so it erupts. And so in a way, maybe we can think of, instead of this being a collision, more of an eruption. That's an eruption.
But from a quantum perspective, it can duplicate. It doesn't erupt. It multiplies from a quantum physics perspective.
That's very good, very good. So this is very creative on an exponential basis.
But there definitely is something to be said too, and Uranus does have to do with patterns too. So like there's that piece there too, and Uranus is. I feel like part of what's happening right now, especially with it interacting with Saturn, is it's breaking stuff up so we can repattern in more natural ways, right? Uranus is more about like how do things authentically work together, or how do they more, even especially organically, with it being in the sign Taurus right now. So I feel like part of this is like things have to break up, including ourselves at times, and then they come back together to repattern in a more natural way. So it's sort of like, I always think about it this way, like all the pieces are there, but how we've put them together isn't the best like container or the best machine. So all goes back in the alchemist pot, if you will, and then comes back together in a new way, which can feel fragmented with Uranus, but ultimately it's all there. You just have to, I guess, have a little bit of patience and a little bit of courage, right? And try to be conscious enough to realize that there's a coming back together.
There is a blessing in chaos, and that has been, I remember philosophically exactly what you said, Tara, that the advantage of chaos is that everything can fall back together with a new form.
Yeah, I know that I think that people feel like the analogy I would use is carrying the structure of your life down to the studs like your house, right? And yet you're going to end up with the same elements, just it's not going to look like it looked before at all.
And if the foundation was rotting, this is the time that you got to get that rebuilt, because if we keep building stuff on top of something that can't sustain or can't hold. I mean, just think about what we're doing to our planet right now, right? If it's not sustainable, so it's because Saturn, that's part of what Saturn brings to us, helps us build that strong foundation. So part of this is checking it. I feel like Uranus is like checking. It's almost, maybe it's like checkmate to the foundation, right? I'm in the United States, but you could see literally that was happening in our capital this week. I mean, there was literally that sort of checking, like, okay, how strong is this? How strong is this thing that you've always thought is like just solid forever? And then we find out if it is or isn't. Yeah.
And we're in the process. That is so true. Thank you so much. We will be right back. This is Planet Buzz, January 9th, and I am with Dr. Tad and Leslie Francis and Tara All. Thank you. We'll be right back.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, the furthest visible planet by the eye. By leaving a cycle based on meaningfulness and truth, Capricorn's energy establishes social boundaries in a structure incorporating rules, authority, and ethics. As a cardinal earth sign depicted by a sea goat climbing from the sea up to the top of a mountain, Capricorn overcomes fears through goals and ambitions to achieve mastery.
Greetings. This is Dana Birnbach, evolutionary astrologer, and you are listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the zodiac, our connection to it, and our roots in the stars.
Tell your friends about Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi again, and we're back, and we are talking about Saturn square Uranus on February 17th. I heard that, and thank you very much, Tara. I stand corrected. We remember that, and we have so many great factors to bring up. Focused action, purpose. I think that's what Leslie was talking about at one time. This is prior, but I want to make sure we cover these things. And to also mention that, when we talk that also that, okay, as I'm stuttering, I was going to be so quick about this, but that we're also, Mars will be out of the shadow period, and Saturn is also about to leave shadow. That's a couple of factors. And the instinct and intellect. So those are threads, but maybe it'll power and connect with some of you about things. And I will add before I end that the vaccine, yes, that was an item back looking at this reset button that we all experienced at the beginning of COVID, you might say, when we really understood April, during that time that we were in it, no way back, but also that Brexit and the new variants. So we have, besides the political stresses that in this country, now Leslie, she's our friend from Canada, we're all on good, we have friendships, and that's really ultimate part of this is how to bridge past the differences and find out how this can become strengths, because there's a lot of shadow.
Well, I wanted to say, I think I shared with you guys that, in Canada, several people, prominent political people in positions, cabinet posts and things like that, had severe consequences because they chose to travel when everybody in Canada was asked to stay home for Christmas and not go anywhere. And the only reason I bring that up is a symbol of dealing with the consequences of choice, because Saturn is also about consequences. And so this is, it means that as we feel the shift and the change going on, to be really clear that as we look into the future, that we want to be able to be accountable for the choices that we make, because Pluto's still in Capricorn. It's still waving in the background, informing us that, the time is for integrity and accountability.
Yeah. And Leslie, you're right, and Mars has everything to do with choices. So we've got with it right there with Uranus, it's right in the mix, and this can us be dealing with the consequences or the trauma of either our action or inaction, both ways. So this can also be realizing where we didn't step up and do what we know we needed to do. One thing that I feel personally that there's real opportunity in that Saturn square Uranus is that if you can think of something that you really want to do, something that you want to give yourself more freedom to do, to liberate yourself, to really go after it, that it's been in your heart to really do it, Saturn can help you actually set limits on the things that keep you from doing it. So this to me is one of the most healthy ways of thinking about it is, let's just say that I really want to do more of this type of collaborations, like with my friends in the astrology world, then Saturn can help me say no to the other things that stop me from doing it. And that's a super powerful way to use the combination of those planets for us.
I love that, Tara. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I think, that recognizing that when we encounter resistance or we encounter barriers where we get redirected, that maybe rather than feeling the frustration that it's not manifesting the way we wanted it to, it's opening up opportunity we didn't even know was possible, which is part of that Uranian energy of just shooting for the moon. And I think of, Uranus and Aquarius, which both Saturn and Jupiter are in, it's like, it's so far outside the box that there's no box to even be outside of. There's everything is possible. And so it's, you encounter resistance, something doesn't manifest, you're forced to go a different direction to an opportunity you didn't even know existed. And that can be part of the beauty of that tension, is you're forced to go somewhere ultimately fantastic if you remain in that authenticity.
Yeah, because I think, that's the other thing, it's like you said before, Laura, expect the unexpected, and in the unexpected, and not just necessarily in your external world, but paying attention to, little glimmers that you get that you think have nothing to do with anything, and yet you feel them somehow. So I would suggest that people keep track of those moments when you have that, what feels like an incredibly important download that bears no resemblance to anything currently going on in your life.
Well, we are still, pardon the duality here of time, space. Boy, again, I keep thinking about the Capricorn, Saturn and Uranus, just the gap in time. Maybe this is part of it. The gap in time between what we knew as conditioning and where we're trying to go can just seem so long. And we were talking a little bit about certain politics, which it's hard to avoid, and we're not coming out with opinions, but just observations, because there's several observations that I think, Tara, you were mentioning about the choice of action, and if you don't take the action, it's still an action, and that's been debated. It's so interesting to see astrology working right in front of us. There's been arguments in every which way how to go, and so interesting. Of course, the push-pull between the tradition and how to break from traditions and everything in between, along with the cause and defending of Mars and the belief structure of Jupiter. And besides the rest of the chart, thank you, we have Venus ruling the Uranus and Taurus, and the nodes. And I think that's what I was going to get back down to, was this, all of this along, like our conversation here. The nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius. We are meant to be talking, and Congress is meant to be debating this. This is like the preliminary. And you also brought up, Nick, Tara, about, which we all know, that Pluto is still in Capricorn, and we're getting to that Pluto return in 2022 in 1 year, in February, for the first time of 3 absolute connections. And that
For the United States, you're talking about?
Yes, thank you. To qualify that. Yes, thank you. And so therefore, if we can begin these conversations now, which are evident, as I was speaking in back east or all across the country, with the nodes in Gemini Sag, will benefit.
One thing too, I know we talked about this before, but with Uranus and Mars conjunct there in Taurus, there can be trauma held in the body. And I know I wanted Dr. Tad, she's so good at talking about, like, I don't know, really like the approaches to working with trauma, because on some level, individually, like we're all, I think, on some level responding to that or reacting to that as this shifts and shakes up things in us. Literally, we can feel it in our bodies, and maybe more than we're used to. So I think that's something to be aware of. And there's also strategies and things that we can do to help with that.
Well, yeah. And I think that some of that is even because Mars is so physical, right? It's so physical movement. And even if it's doing yoga or qigong or something at home, because you're limited in terms of, I haven't been to the gym since March. But finding ways that you can still really engage with your physical body and be able to check in too, because, as humans, we have this very odd behavior of, when we are in pain, we tend to stop breathing.
Yeah.
We tend to hold our breath. And it's the last thing you really should do. You have to breathe. Like, what will help the physical pain is deep belly breathing. And so just really finding practices for yourself to drop into your body, whether that's through exercise, through healthy diets, through even just 15 minutes to meditate, and just dropping into your body to then help you decide what action or non-action to take, can help mitigate some of that trauma. Because right now, with that Mars-Saturn conjunction, it can be triggering about the actions that we're taking. And whether that's soul PTSD, right, where we have a traumatic response because there's soul memory of having done something previously that resulted in either our harm or the harm of others. And so we're in this sort of arrested state. But so by really checking in with the body, then you're able to move it out physically, move out the trauma through breath, through movement, through, even if, depending where you live, like feet in the dirt.
Yeah.
With it being in Taurus, take your, even though it's cold, okay, do it for like 30 seconds. Put your feet in the dirt. If you're on the West Coast, like Tara, go to the beach, get your feet in the sand. And it could be the snow if you're up in Canada.
No. Why do you think we stop moving and stop breathing? Like, I know I do it too. Why is it? Why do you think that why do we do that?
I was wondering that too. Thank you, Tara. I was wondering, it's like the eye of the storm. Is it because if we made a sound, the bear would hear us if we're out in the cave? I mean, where does this come from? Right?
I mean, it's part of the whole body tenses up. So part of that ends up being the lungs, right? It's like I had injured my shoulder back when all of this started, and I was just in physical therapy yesterday, and I'm being dry needled, which is super painful, and having to breathe through it because I feel my whole body tense. But the whole point of the needling is to move the needle until the muscle stops being tense and let's go. Like, so if I tense up, it's only going to take longer.
there's
And Neptune's in Pisces, which is like, in some ways, that's part of our remedy here, right? Especially as it squares the nodes. It's like we've got to get flow back, and because you're right, nothing heals when we just stop things up, and Taurus can stop things up, and Saturn can. I mean, so what we have, and Aquarius is a fixed sign. We have a lot of energy that can just, hold it tight.
It is an extraordinary question. I'm so glad you asked that. As far as grounding, oh my gosh, I almost broke the table. This, I don't know what the name of this is, but it's huge. And it's a big stone, and it's supposed to be good for grounding.
It's a Shiva Lingam.
Yeah, and I put my feet on it. You're talking like I'm up here in a condo up in the air, but I put my feet on it because I'm supposed to ground. As you can tell, I do need grounding. So I was just bringing that up. Yeah. But why? Well, Laura, I think earlier in our conversation, Tara had brought up, because of your psychology expertise, education, that you were going to explain about trauma. Or Tara, what was the question?
I think she did. I think she just did answer. But I like to tap her brain, because she's got just good responses. And I feel like part of right now is we do a lot of talking about what's happening. We can try to understand it, but we need things that can help us actually right now be in it. And Taurus also is a sign about embodiment. So we don't get to just escape this just by, I understand it in my brain, this is happening. And so I'm just saying it helps me. And I think at least the people that are in my life to have something that they can do right now in the moment when the chaos is happening.
Yeah. And I think too, maybe because of the Uranian energy that's brought in with this, like, try something new. Don't do the exercise that you've been doing for the last 10 years. Try something out of the box for you that, like, maybe you've always sort of wanted to try, but were scared. Like, this is such a great time to play with that and see how that shifts stuff for you, because that square is asking us to break up old patterning and be inventive in how we do that. And I think that gets doubled because of both Saturn and Jupiter being in Aquarius, that need for the innovative, the new, the cutting edge, the funhouse mirror perspective of reality.
That's awesome. I love that. Thank you. That's good advice for me too. I was like, that's good. It's good. Do something different, and maybe you'll get something different, right? So
yeah. Right.
Right. I mean, that's what they say. The definition of a fool is doing something over and over again the same way and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
Who
doesn't do that though? I mean, we all
right.
Well, and be open to suggestion and create. Connect more with your community, whatever that community happens to be, because like as we do Planet Buzz, I'm always excited because people bring different perspectives, and I love that. And I think that's the other thing we need to do. We need to be open to, instead of trying to get entrenched and defend our territory, whatever that happens to be open to viewing things from different perspectives, because that also helps break whatever logjam there is going on inside your head, because of course Aquarius is fixed air, and then so you get stuck in the fixed air part, and then you insist on embodying that because of the fixed energy in Taurus. And so also letting go of the need to be right.
Well, that has a lot to do with the South Node in Sagittarius, a little opinion, and particularly because Jupiter is part of this reset.
Amen. Yeah, because if you think you have to be right, there's pretty much a guarantee that you're not. I mean,
ultimately, yeah, 100%.
And and so what we're dealing with, it's really interesting talking about the nodal axis and Jupiter squaring it is what is the truth, because especially and not just in your country but in mine, because I live in a province where there are people on the far right who thinks that COVID's a hoax. And then you have the people who are actually experiencing it and what is real to them versus what's real to other people. What's true to some people is not apparently true to others. And because we live in this world where there's so much communication, we can see the polarization, up close and personal or far away, it doesn't matter. It seems to be everywhere, and trying to grapple with that is a challenge.
Well, it's very true. It reminds me way back, there used to be a term saying it's relative. Do you remember that or something? It was many years ago.
Yeah, we still say that now.
Yeah, I do. It's
all relative.
It is relative. It is extraordinary. Yeah. Boy, so many thoughts jamming in the brain. It's almost
Leslie,
like
you're so I think that's, and I was hearing I was listening to something earlier today too about that Neptune. And in this case, they were actually, and this was someone in another country talking about, like in the United States, that, you know, this insurrection at the Capitol, and they were literally saying, do you really know it's real? They said, because Neptune is squaring the nodes, so we get this stuff. And I'm not saying it's not real. Please don't take it that way.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that with Neptune square the nodes, it's things are really up for question, right? So in every moment when you're looking at something and automatically thinking in the South Node Sagittarius way, oh, I know that's how it is, or I know that's what it is. The medicine is really partly in the North Node in Gemini, which is take another look, right? Be open to another perspective, because some of what we see is just being fed to us through filters. It's not clear. That's probably what Neptune does. It creates a fuzz and a fog, right, until we actually get to the clear.
Well, there's two thoughts that you instigate. One is denial. I've been listening and looking at so many terms of denial. And in one way, it's even me maybe denying the fact that that's what we're dealing with, to realize that there is so much that people aren't accepting. And what you're presenting the antidote to is curiosity. You know, be curious. Yeah, I like that. But this denial.
And also, you know, part of this, I think, is learning to connect to what's in here.
Yeah.
As what going to guide you, as opposed to always looking to external sources to tell you what's true and what's not. You know, again, it's the Uranus in Taurus, the body. What will I had a spiritual teacher that said once, your body will never lie to you. Your brain can lie to you all the, your conscious mind can rearrange things and turn things upside down to make it fit whatever you want it to fit, whereas your body will always be truthful to you.
The kinesiology is based on that, the
right.
Going with the truth or going like this.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's a good thing to remember. That's absolutely. And purpose. I wanted to bring that. I know, Leslie, you were talking about purpose, because that gets a lot to do with authenticity. And it's a fixed cross. There's a lot to be gained, I think, from the fixed cross. As limiting as it is, it's riveting in many ways, because it is embodiment. It's purpose. It's how we can find authenticity. I'm sorry. That was just a kickoff point there. Yeah, I'm trying to.
And apparently none of us were paying attention. No. Well,
pardon me.
And again, back to the whole unexpected business that whatever, and I think Dr. Laura said it before, that you may set off in a particular direction thinking that's your purpose, only to discover along the way that it's a completely different purpose. And having your purpose reflect what is authentically you, not somebody said I should do this, or it's what everybody else does. Finding your own path.
Maybe that's part of chaos, trying to tie this together a little bit, because if there's chaos everywhere, one may have an initial purpose. Take the Congress right now. Well, I don't know about that as an example.
Maybe we don't want to be too political.
No, but they're trying to get sometimes purpose. Okay, we won't use that as an example, but in other words, the purpose or the motive or the goal, somehow they're all related, and it can change according to the sequence of events, and we're in such
here's an example that is still super current living in Georgia, right? So we will have 2 new Democratic senators, one African American, one Jewish man, both whom had close friendships with the late John Lewis. But so Stacey Abrams is largely being credited for their win. Had she won the gubernatorial race, she would not have been able to be this driving force with her nonprofit to have this incredible drive to get people registered and work on issues around voter suppression.
Awesome.
There you go.
That's a perfect example of someone, having an experience and then gathering up their energy and moving in a different direction. And, I because I do pay attention to politics in the U.S., and embracing that role and giving it everything she's got without any sense of regret or feeling like she was denied anything.
Yeah.
And Leslie, when you were talking, one thing that came to my mind was that, so Saturn is really very much about, climbing the mountain or doing the great work, putting in the effort to accomplish the thing. But, and so is Capricorn, but Saturn is involved here with this square we're talking about. The Taurus is literally where you choose what has value, what's worth doing the Saturn work. And so I feel like that's part of what's being kind of renovated here too, to get back to figure out, okay, so what if you put all your effort into something and you build the most wonderful thing to find out later on that it's not what really meant it, not what really meant something or what really had value. So Uranus and Taurus helps us check back in with what's worth it, what's worth the energy, what's worth going for, what's worth rebuilding, what's worth remaking, and what's worth changing.
What's worth letting go, what's worth surrendering.
And that's part of that square, right? Too. Yeah. What do you want to letting things fall away because they no longer serve you? And we can have that Taurian attachment for sure. But learning, right, I don't actually like that, piece of furniture anymore. I don't like whatever it is, and because it's Taurus, it may be much more materialistic with certain things, but letting, that when you let go like that, then there's space for this unexpected. Mm-hmm. Then there's the room. It's like, if you only get, so many square feet, okay, well, you've got to let something go to let something else in.
And you only have so much energy. Yeah. Right. So if you funnel it all in one direction, you don't have any left for something else. And I just, for me, these things are exciting. I'm not saying everything's easy. It's not easy to me either, but there's a lot of excitement to me in what we can do with this energy,
Well, and the truth is, there is going to be a tendency to resist the change because we're talking fixed signs. And so we know what happens when we do that, because Uranus is the stick of dynamite in the dam of your life. And if you decide not to start disassembling it, it's going to blow up anyway in some way, shape, or form. And I don't mean that necessarily in a physical way. I just mean that you're more likely to feel if you resist it and don't listen to the call to change, you're going to feel like you've been hit by a 2x4.
Yeah, wouldn't you rather choose where the explosion is going to happen? Like, put it in something you actually want to blow up.
Well, electricity. When we think of Aquarius and that lightning bolt, with a flash of light, it sees everything, it goes away. Like the synopsis in our brain of the electrons that leap across distances to make a connection. This is the first of 3 squares. It's amazing. The next one will be on June 14th, and the last one will be December 23rd. I have those dates right. And so, and it's already, when you consider that conjunction was just December 21st, my goodness, we're only 2 weeks down the pike, I guess. Yeah.
So there's time to consciously.
Yeah, we will refocus. It will be great. Next week will be Cosmic Collaboration, and tonight is Planet Buzz, and I have Leslie Francis from Canada here. Wave, Leslie, and Carol All from Los Angeles, and Dr. Pad from Georgia. And we have about half a minute. That music can kind of slide in the background as we finish up here. And it's just been I'm so grateful. And again, like a community, you saved the day as I got lost. I don't know what happened with my technological online site, but I think my early degree in Aquarius is having to get reset myself. And thanks to you guys, I'm so glad to be connected.
No, we're a team.
Yeah.
All right.
We're a community. We're a community.
We'll be back.
Exactly.
All right. Blessings to all. Good night.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The views expressed on this program are those